We are back, franchising stronger together. I'm your host, Red Boswell, president of the International Franchise Professionals Group, IFPG. Excited to introduce everyone today to Clarissa Bradstock. Clarissa is CEO and CPO. Who knows what CPO stands for? Chief People Officer of Any Lab Test Now. Clarissa, thanks for being on the call today.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, excited to have you, but first we want to talk about how you and your family are doing in beautiful Atlanta.
We are doing great. Everybody is safe. I have several children working as essential workers, but everybody's safe. We're all doing well.
Awesome. Well, we sure enjoyed having you this past week. Get to host the IFA webinar with some rock stars like yourself, all about franchise conventions. What are we doing? You had some great nuggets to share, so appreciate you giving even more time today to franchisors out there. Just helping give advice and share your best practices and your experiences, and maybe even some good news to share as well. So let's jump right into it. Any Lab Test Now, as we understand how you guys were impacted, let's also give the listeners an understanding of who you are, what you do, the size of your organization.
Well, Any Lab Test Now has over 180 locations, and we were the first folks out there doing what's called direct access testing for lab testing. So we do clinical DNA and toxicology lab testing, where the customer can come right in, order their own, say, cholesterol test, order their own drug test. We also work with employers and also work with physicians that refer their patients to us.
Got it. Okay. And what's the investment range for a franchise?
It is between 135 up to a little over 200,000.
Okay, great. So very affordable franchise. Yeah. You're dealing with real people. You're not dealing with big institutions buying these. How are those real people handling this crisis? How's it look?
I tell you what, as I think we can all attest to, the last 2 months have been very scary. What we've seen is we were having an absolutely record first quarter, moving up into to the day, March 13th, right? And then all of a sudden, of course, like anybody else, as soon as the stay-at-home orders and everything happened, we were fortunate in that we are an essential business, and people still need lab testing. But what happened is, especially with it being a healthcare institution, people were a little bit reticent getting out. So we saw some of our standard revenue go down for some of our standard clinical testing for about a month. And then we started to see it curve up. So it was really scary. I think that's like any franchise system with the unknown. When you just see things kind of going down and you're wondering, where is the bottom going to be? So we did a lot of things in communicating with the franchisees to help them weather through that. And now what we're seeing is, now that we're wrapping up the month of May, we're getting back to some of the same levels close to what we were having in the first quarter. So for us, because of the business we're in, fortunately, I think we'll be more of a V than a U. But we're doing well, but it's still scary, I think. Let's be real. There are a lot of challenges day in and day out. Our expenses have gone up a little bit just because if you have to buy more PPE, but they've done really well navigating through it.
And how much of that current revenue are tests for COVID? Or you mentioned at the beginning that you were the first to do certain, I think you said tests. How is that?
Well, great question. We were the first to do we've been doing direct access testing and for clinical labs since 1992. So we were first in that market. And when COVID, this was one of the challenges we had, because here we are in a brand that every day you hear on the news, lab testing, right? Well, we strategically decided not to do the first test, which is the one where you have people that are really, really actively thinking they're infectious and they have symptoms. We protected our customers from that because we just did not have an environment for that. We didn't have the right PPE. So we became that environment for our existing customers. Then now we're really happy that we can be a part of the Get Back to Work effort, because we did start doing the antibody testing. So if someone thinks and they're completely asymptomatic that they've been exposed, we started doing that about 2.5 weeks ago. And that's going really well. So that's really helped with going back, but also we're seeing more of our standard business as well, more drug testing and more clinical testing. Because, you know, you can only hold off so long if you need to have a clinical test due to underlying health conditions. So.
So Clarissa, what about you? You're the czar. This world is going crazy. Your franchisees are scared. What have you done to help them, to lead them, corral them, communicate with them? What's that look like in the past, present, and future?
Really good question, because what we did in the past is we would have a communication strategy where we would have a monthly newsletter, monthly calls, quarterly newsletters going out to the staff of the franchisees, ongoing communications on a day-to-day basis. And what we did, and it started on March 13th, is we started a town hall meeting using Zoom. And prior to that, they were conference calls, right? They weren't Zoom. We had just, thank goodness, earlier this year signed up with Zoom, so we were a little bit acclimated to it. So we were Johnny on the spot, let's have a Zoom town hall meeting, and we've had a Zoom town hall meeting every day since that day, excluding weekends. And they last anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. So that changed our strategy.
And who on the corporate team gets on those?
Everybody on the leadership team. We have client care and support representatives. They're not on the call, but I have everybody, because it's not only important for us in the messaging and the franchisees to ask questions. It's important for the whole office team. We're learning a lot from franchisees too. And as you know, what's really great about Zoom is we can have this type of dialogue like you and I are having today. And in the meantime, they're chatting their questions. So we get that interaction, and then they also share big wins. They also share concerns. And right there, instead of letting it really percolate, we can answer those questions. And if we don't have the answer that day, the good news is we're going to be back together tomorrow. So we'll have an answer tomorrow. And I think for us, the need for us doing it every day is, again, we're in lab testing. We're in the medical field, and that's changing on a dime. So initially we had the every day giving them information about what states are closing, what you should do, then the PPP and getting all the loans, and then how we're going to do the antibody test. The content is just constant for us.
And what percent, so franchisees, I mean, March 13th, there's everybody on there, 100%, I'm sure, right? Everybody was freaking, right? Yep. So how has that gone? Because usually it'll peak and then it goes lower and lower. Have you stayed pretty high up there with all hands on deck?
Yep, we have stayed up there where we've gotten every day, roughly 80% of the franchisees on the call, and it's stayed at that level. Because every day it seems like there's something new that we have to address.
Do the franchisees typically work in the lab center, or they have a remote office?
It's a combination. We have some that are multi-unit operators having 6, 7, 8, 9 locations, but a lot of them do work within the facility. So they're taking a break from helping their clients to come and take time for the call. And the only thing that we've seen, we have seen a little bit of decline where people may not be on the call every single day. And the reason being now is because they're busy helping clients. A month ago, now it's just, boy, I really wish I could have been on the call, but I was helping people. So can you send me the recording?
Oh, good. You record it. Yep. How do you see that playing out into the near and midterm future? At some point, you'll back off of the daily. Any predictions?
I think we'll probably go through the middle of June. And I think what we'll do is we're going to let the franchisees help guide that. Let's decide when it's a good use of your time and when it's not. And when things get back to where this change isn't absolutely constant, especially, again, we're in the lab testing business, right? And it starts to just settle down a little bit. We'll probably take it to once a week at that point. Now, on top of all of the COVID, we also took this opportunity and we are rolling out two major initiatives, one a technology initiative and another one that's a marketing initiative that we're doing at the same time. So you can see why there's been a lot of moving parts. And the great part about it, not to say, I mean, if you try to look, I'm a half full kind of person, is that because we've got the engagement, boy, it's a great time to roll out these initiatives because everybody is looking for ways to enhance the business. And we've got their attention, right? I mean, they're engaged. So boy, let's learn about this together. And the other thing that these aren't well-scripted town hall meetings. They can't be. I mean, they are very informal. It's you know, it's not all, you know, put with a bow and nice. And sometimes it's just, boy, let's show you what we just wrapped up 30 minutes ago. And the franchisees get that, and I think they appreciate it.
And when you've got that huge of an attendance on a Zoom call, I would assume you mute everyone, except
Yes.
and maybe they raise their hand or they submit the chat, the question, and you guys really handle the audio.
Yep, what we do is we do it where everybody's muted upon entry, and then we ask them to put their questions in chat, and if we can quickly answer a question, and that way everybody, of course, can see it, and then we get more questions related to that topic. And then if it looks like it, of course, if the question's a little, we don't really necessarily understand it from the chat, or it's maybe more complicated, we say, hey, let's unmute you, and why don't you walk us through the scenario, because we're not quite understanding what your challenge is or how we can help you.
So Clarissa, during this time, there's pivots, right? We hear that word every hour now. Your franchisees out in the field, learning, growing, coming up with new ideas. Have you seen any franchisees during this time come up with something that you just went, oh my gosh, roll it out system-wide right away, or maybe even something that could be permanent?
Great question, and it actually goes back a little bit earlier than this particular situation. This is part of one of the initiatives we're rolling out, which is kits where we can send to people's homes. And we were initially thinking of a way that we could send the first generation COVID testing, you know, the ones where you don't want to necessarily have sick people in, the kits to their home. Well, because of FDA rules and all of that, we weren't able to do that. But then what we did is we motivated us to work on this e-commerce initiative, which, by the way, some of the tests and some of the impetus for it came from a franchisee. So now I will tell you what's really interesting, speaking though of our franchisees, because I do want to do a special call out to, we had a franchisee through all of this back in March. We had a franchisee, it's a mother, father, and daughter. And the mother and father were in the hospital with COVID. The mother was 18 days on a ventilator, and they didn't even know if she was making it. And the franchisee, who's actually married to a doctor and everything, she was on the calls every day. And getting support, because she felt like she was stranded. I mean, she couldn't go to her mentors, they were sick. So that, to us as a brand, I mean, it made it really real for us to have somebody so close. And by the way, she's recovering, and we're just so thankful, both of she and her husband.
Outstanding. And you are their extended family, you know, we call it Fran Fam, for your franchise family. And no better reason to be in franchising than the support, the guidance, the accountability, the best practices, the emotional and financial support, the strength of the brand, the great ideas. We can go on and on about why in the world would someone be in franchising. Now it proves it more than ever. Let's talk franchise development. So you're a fairly rapidly growing franchisor. You certainly pivoted and focused all your time and effort on your current Zs and protecting them and supporting them. What did the two pieces of franchise development look like? And we talk about the folks in process when this hit the fan, March 13th, as you said. What happened to those folks? And then let's talk new pipeline and how that's growing.
As COVID hit in March, we actually had a franchisee who'd been in the pipeline for, a couple of months. And he signed on to the brand, and we're actively looking for real estate now. He was well aware of what was going on with COVID. Felt very comfortable with the brand, so we were really honored and proud to have him on board. And then what we actually reduced some, like a lot of people, some of our marketing budget for franchise development, just because we had to pull back on a lot of our internal expenses so we could continue to support the franchisees. But we still got a lot of leads coming through. So we've got a good pipeline now. We've had 2 virtual discovery days, looking for 2 more that we're having in June. So we're right now, we initially back in March decided maybe we should pull back on some of our objectives. But now we have some really great candidates for some really good markets. So we're very bullish now.
And on these virtual discovery days,
Mm-hmm.
compare them to a traditional in-person discovery day. What was the volume of folks attending? Maybe the timeline of each, you went from 8 hours to 6 hours. What's the difference?
And we always have small discovery days because by the time they come to a discovery day, they've done all of their validation, they've done all of their business plan. It really is kind of that meets the team kind of day. Boy, what a change. What we would have before is, of course, they'd come in the day before, we'd go out to dinner, we'd get to know them, we talk about their family, and then we'd come and spend, 5 hours at the office, and they would get to meet different members of the team. We really miss the social part because that's where you get to see, how you connect as human beings. So that's tough. That's really tough. The virtual meeting, the virtual the virtual discovery days, they are shorter. I think it's less breaks, less coffee chat. You try to do that, but once people are online, they really want to go through it. They don't want to necessarily take a break and then regroup. So it typically takes anywhere from 3.5 to 4 hours.
Nice. And you're seeing similar, it's a little early to tell probably, but similar closings or awardings percentage-wise?
It looks good. We've gotten some very positive feedback. Yes.
Yeah. Nice.
So.
Well, let me throw it out open wide. Any other advice, guidance, predictions, anything else for the franchisors out there just looking for some kind of help exiting this COVID crisis and hopefully thriving in the second half of the year?
I think, and it's hard to really answer this question because you don't want to come off trite. But the key thing is to over communicate. I know people say that all the time, but here's what happens when we are under stress as human beings. We only hear what we need to hear at that moment. And so if my concern at this town hall meeting that I have, if I were a franchisee and my only concern now is how am I going to pay my rent, I'm really not necessarily going to be listening for the cues on the latest marketing. Now, once I get my PPP loan, right, and it's funded, now all of a sudden, what did they say about that marketing piece? I wasn't even really listening to that, right? So we've seen that people ask us things and we're like, okay, we've talked about that for the last 3 or 4 times. But we understand that they're listening at that time for what is going to help them. And you don't know where they are and what's going to help them. So you just have to communicate and repeat and repeat. And then there are times when you just have to say, okay, let's take this offline because I can see, I need to go a little bit deeper dive because it's a little bit more complicated. So
Really?
I think that's the key thing. And then the other thing is, as a franchisor, our franchisees are looking for transparency. And let's play it real. It's not necessarily all going to be sunshines and roses, but at the same time, giving a path and a roadmap for how we're going to come through this and why we're going to come through it stronger as a team. And the only last thing I'll say with that is that this it's like being, in quarantine with your family. It makes you, I think, hopefully, a stronger family. You'll have great memories. If you look on the positive side of all of the difficult situations we're all facing. And I think for a franchise brand, as a brand, we're going to come out of this stronger because you know what? It's made us even tighter of a community.
It really has. Yeah, amen. That's a great way to end it, Clarissa. We are growing. Each franchise organization is growing tighter together. They'll never forget what you did for them during this crisis. Us as a IFPG, as a franchise consultant and membership organization, we are burning the midnight oil, working extra, not signing folks up, not generating new revenue, taking care of our members today, supporting them with great franchisors, guiding, giving advice, folks in the field that are really experiencing it, and hopefully, we're blessing lives and hopefully saving some jobs, but also deepening relationships, deepening trust because of the sacrifice we're all making to help our fellows, franchisors in the community. So we appreciate you twice in a week here helping others out. Any lab tests now? CEO and CPO, Clarissa Bradstock, Red Basel with IFPG, and Franchising Stronger Together. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, Clarissa.
Great. Thanks a lot, Red. Thanks, everyone.